Morning, everyone. Nice to be back in Tel Aviv. As Moshe said, my name is Daniele Catteddu. I am the Global Chief Technology Officer at the Cloud Security Alliance. So this morning, as Moshe mentioned, we are going to discuss about cloud assurance and continuous assurance more in general. Moshe said already a few things about Cloud Security Alliance, especially the Israeli chapter. In general, CSA is a pretty large community. We are about almost 200,000 individual members, 500 corporate members, and then perhaps most importantly, over 100 chapters globally, which are our eyes and hands in any country, so that we are able to customize whatever we do in terms of research and best practices to the needs of the local markets. We do also have over 30 working groups. So we do generate a lot of papers, research. All of it is free of charge. So I would really encourage all of you to go and check them out. If you have any questions or if you want to participate, feel free to reach out to our community. We are always ready and happy to provide some support. But with that said, let's jump into what is going to be the main discussion for today. So first of all, I'm going to kind of set the context a bit on the reason why continuous assurance is even important in this market. We will discuss about what is continuous assurance. We are going to touch upon two of the programs within CSA that are relevant in this space, so the STAR program and the CCM. And then finally, we are going to discuss on how to possibly achieve continuous assurance. I feel like this initial presentation, it fits fairly well in the context of the agenda because, as Moshe mentioned, we're gonna have panels around DevSecOps, about serverless, so about the operation of the cloud and how important automation is, the shift-left approach. So automation is important in the context of cloud, and then we're going to close up with compliance, another area in which the use of automation, it can help to streamline and support better our process for both operations and compliance. Now, with that said, so this is a picture taken from the AWS website. Those are 50 plus, I guess, seals and logos, and they correspond to the amount of certifications and code of conduct and attestations that AWS has. In other terms, it means that nowadays we are sort of like measuring assurance by kilo. This is like my mom going to the supermarket. It's like, I would like 2 kilos of red meat and then 5 kilos of bananas and 1 kilo of ISO 27001 certification. That's pretty much the way in which we are measuring assurance. I know that it sounds a simplification, but that's what it is. Because think about in terms of user capability to understand what all those logos means. If you want to get an understanding of what's the security, how is the security posture of a cloud service provider or a cloud service, and how you can in fact measure the level of assurance that is attached to it, certainly like looking at the simple logos there, it doesn't really help. Additionally, I know that some books can say the opposite, so that security and compliance, they are supposed to go hand in hand and mutually support each other because through the level of controls and accountability that you impose for governance and compliance, then you can also support operation. That's the theory. In practice, from what I have seen lately, more and more, especially in the cloud market, what happens is that we have a substantial portion of our our compliance budget. Well, a substantial compliance budget is sometimes being bigger than the one on security, which is a sort of, if you like, a contradiction, as in we are spending more money in trying to demonstrate to someone that we are doing things correctly, as opposed to focusing on doing things better in the operation, from the operational standpoint. Now, certainly, we want to move to this situation towards something that is more closer or much closer to what the books are telling us, so that compliance and security should work hand in hand and mutually support each other. Now, one of the reasons why this is important is also because, as we all know, cloud computing is a very ephemeral technology, especially through via the latest improvements in the technology. And again, Moshi mentioned serverless, for instance, or function as a service. We are going to discuss again about DevSecOps. That is the very starting point for that process of continuous change that we have in the cloud. Now, if the underlying technological infrastructure is going to change so frequently and so often, clearly when it comes to security, when it comes to governance, when it comes to compliance, we need to apply an approach that is able to react to this continuous change, and that is continuity in auditing, for instance. Now, when we talk about continuous assurance, essentially what we are looking at is a process by which we can move from a point-in-time type of verification, which is typical, for instance, of the large majority of the compliance approach from the auditing standpoint in the market. Think about ISO 27001 or think about SOC 2. They are a way to measure in a specific point in time what's the performance, what's the status of your security program, of your security controls. What we need instead is something that is much more accurate, something that is not looking at the past, but rather is looking at security and controls in a continuum. Essentially, we are looking at reducing the time window that exists between the each verification of a certain control. Now, very often in the market, when we talk about continuous assurance, we enter in a kind of minefield, sort of place where all the buzzword can exist. So you will certainly hear several vendors, and most of them are providing a very accurate description of what they're doing, except that it's a partial approach to what is supposed to be an approach to continuous, well, to start with, security and privacy by design, policy is a code, compliance is a code, continuous compliance by default. Those are all terms that you often hear in the market. What is happening is that there are several solutions that are able to provide semi-precise picture of the situation on a continuous basis, except that none of these solutions that you find out there, they speak consistently the same language. The way in which risk is often measured, the way in which metrics are defined, it varies a lot depending on which tool you're looking at. The end result is that while you might have, on a per technology base, some good understanding on the metrics that you can associate to the implementation of certain control and therefore to your security posture, then you get stuff that are not, that don't compare apple to apple, essentially. Instead, if we look at continuous assurance, we need to look at some very basic ingredients here. And all of them, we need to tend towards standardization, because that's what we need in order to be able to speak the same language, as we say here. And when I say speak the same language, I'm referring to the idea of having controls, or at least control objectives, that we can compare to each other. The other very important ingredient is certainly the mapping across different frameworks. As I have shown in my initial slides, there are so many standards out there. So how can we compare them? How do they relate to each other? That is a necessary exercise of gap analysis and mapping between different frameworks that can give us a better understanding or a single view of what is the language that we should be speaking, should be using. So for this purpose, the idea of interoperability and standardization is key. Without standardization, we can't really have interoperability. That is true for technology. That is true also when it comes to implementation of controls. And then certainly we need machine readability, the idea of having control frameworks in a spreadsheet or use them on whatever other 19th century tool is not conceivable. We need standards that can be used in a machine readable format. Another, in my opinion, possibly the most important step in a process of defining what is fundamental for continuous assurance is certainly the relation that exists between the concepts of control objectives, technical controls, and metrics. So technical control objectives are essentially what you are supposed to do at eye level. I'm going to discuss in a second about the CSA cloud control matrix. What we offer within the cloud control matrix is a set of control objectives. Now, control objectives are a good aspiration point, the general target that you want to have. But then we need to define also those technical controls that are the ways in which we translate the generic high-level objectives into technical controls that would fit in our specific implementation. Without making applying that level of granularity, it becomes difficult to start measuring things in the proper way. And then, of course, since we need to measure, then we need to create metrics. We need to create ways in which we can associate measurable quantities to the implementation of these controls. And then finally, and clearly fundamental to the overall idea of continuous is the idea of automation and then tools related to automations. Now, in this context, what CSA, there are a couple of relevant research artifacts and programs that are important in this context. One is certainly the CSA Cloud Control Matrix. Now, how many of you are familiar with the CCM? Okay, well, I was hoping more. Anyway, so CCM is nothing more than, how the name says, a framework, a control framework. As I mentioned before, it used the ideas of control objectives. It has a structure of 17 domains that cover pretty much all the essential domains of cybersecurity. And then each one of these domains has a number of control objectives. We don't provide you only with control objectives. We also give you a guidance on how those controls are relevant on per cloud service model. We tell you also what's the applicability of that control depending on if you are a cloud service provider or cloud customer. We tell you what's the relevance within the architecture of an organization. And importantly, we provide with mappings and gap analysis to other external standards in a way that through the lenses of the CCM, you can understand what is important for you vis-a-vis your internal requirements and standards and vis-a-vis external international standards like ISO or compliance regime, which is, of course, it's an important detail if we go back to the idea of standardization and common language that I was mentioning a second ago. CCM is one of the many components of our STAR program. STAR is the acronym for Security, Trust, Assurance, and Risk. And it's essentially an ecosystem of security frameworks, so the CCM, an approach for auditing through self-assessment and or third-party certification or attestation, a registry where we published the result of the assessment in order to foster transparency and to provide to whoever is consulting that registry, which again is free of charge and accessible to anyone, the right information to describe the security posture of a cloud service, and then to use and consume that information as a part of your decision-making process, as a part of your procurement process. And then, of course, we have also a network of partners auditing companies and tool providers that support the implementation of the program. As the STAR program is essentially roots around the idea of certification and attestation, or anyway auditing, the role of CSA is simply the one of governing body. We set the standards, we define the rules, everything else that is the operation of the program, so the auditing approach and the definition of tools, that is left to the market. Now, the reason why I specifically mentioned CCM and the STAR program in the context of continuous assurance is because there are many ways in which, especially CCM, can help you in supporting the implementation of a continuous approach to assurance. So first of all, it offers, as I said, control objectives. So in general terms, let's get on the same page when it comes to like high-level concept. It provides the mappings, so that connection between our CCM controls and all the other relevant standards out there. By the way, that it would include NIST at 153, it would include the NIST cybersecurity framework, the SOC 2, the ISO standards, so the 27,000 family, 1, 17, and 18, and so on and so forth. We are in the process also of defining technical controls. Of course, being CCM technology agnostic standard, we are not going to provide you necessarily with the specific control that you need to implement, let's say, in a GCP or AWS or Azure environment. That's something that we are working on specifically with the hyperscaler for them to provide that level of details. We are, though, working on metrics. So we are trying to define in details what is the way in which we can decompose a CCM control objectives into more measurable and meaningful metrics that you can use in order to understand the level of effectiveness and efficiency in the implementation of that control. The initial catalog of those metrics has been already published. You can find that available on our website again. It covers just a percentage of the overall 197 controls of CCM. Nevertheless, we believe it's already a pretty good start. And then machine readability, we do offer to everyone the option of using our cloud control metrics, which is in its essence an old-fashioned spreadsheet into a machine readable way. So we got the YAML and the HTML web version and JSON versions of the CCM. Plus, I'm not sure if any of you is familiar with the work that NIST is doing with OSCAL. OSCAL is essentially a representation language for governance and compliance. It does present security controls in a standardized format, and the idea is really to support and streamline the process of collection and presentation of evidence in the implementation of a security framework. And we do have provided a version, OSCAL version for our CCM, so that you can use that in that fashion just as well. Clearly, there cannot be assurance, as I mentioned before, without automation and tools. So we need to still look for additional tools or more precise tools or a combination of tools in order to be able to support continuous assurance at scale, because that's what we want to do. Having like small islands in which you can enforce continuous assurance, it might be a good solution in the short term, e.g. focusing on those services that are more riskier in nature. So those critical and sensitive services that you want to have a higher level of assurance for. But then I think the long-term goal is supposed to be having a better understanding of all the overall infrastructure on a continuous basis. And then finally, certification and attestation as a way to, at the end, put a stamp on what has been agreed. In terms of some final thoughts, so as I said, continuous assurance is nothing else the result of a process in which we define controls, we establish metrics to measure their efficiency and efficacy, we monitor them, and then we audit them. And then we find a way to report them towards the upper management or the board. Continuous assurance need to be based on agreed upon standard. The idea of each tool provider to use their own way to measure stuff, it doesn't work, it doesn't scale. So we need to find a way to have a set of agreed upon standards in order to be able to compare the result of different tools. And I know there might be some tool providers in the room. Certainly there are several of them that are part of the CSA membership. So we welcome their support in this challenging project. In terms of what an organization needs to understand the details beyond the security control objectives. As I said, those are important. You're defining an high level, what you need to do, what's your goal in terms of implementation of certain security property and parameter, it's important, but you need to get into the fine-grained details of what that control means vis-a-vis a specific infrastructure. And then you need to support metrics to be able to quantify risk, which is really the next step, because risk quantification is going to support a modern and mature organization in their cloud journey in many ways. So first of all, from the operational standpoint, it helps supporting that approach towards a zero trust strategy. I was last year opening this CSA event and I talked about zero trust, but essentially if the idea is that we need to rely on philosophical skepticism and continuous risk management in order to be in control of who is having access to resources, an access that has to be not just in time, but just during the time of the access, then we need to quantify the risk associated to each access to a piece of information. And therefore, quantification is necessary. If we look at it from the risk management perspective, certainly quantification of risk is going to be fundamental when associated to the idea of cyber insurance. And then from the governance and corporate responsibility perspective, the idea of having clear parameters that you can use for the reporting to the board. Finally, we said that it will require automation, and there is a space in the market for additional tools and additional standards. We believe the CSA is well placed in leading this journey towards a process of continuous assurance, and certainly, as usual, we're going to be very happy to get your support and your help with that. And with that, my time is up. If you have any questions, I guess we can discuss it over the break or during the rest of the morning. Thank you very much.